All of my burnout was related to the pandemic. It was extremely mentally taxing to see everything that we did. And a lot of people were dying, especially in those early pre-vaccine days. And I think working at that level and within that environment for such a long time absolutely burnt me out. Contrary to what I thought life in Australia would be like and what doctors in Australia would be like, this job was extremely intense. My normal 10-hour day was turning into 12, 13 hours, day in, day out, back to back.
Wow.
And by the end of that really short period, I actually fully burnt out on that last day of my rotation. There is basically no extra qualification or exam that you need to do to go to Australia. Objectively, it is a better working life, a better quality of working life, less hours for your full-time job, and you're paid better. But it is, at the end of the day, same nonsense, different country.
What is going on, guys? My name is Kenji and welcome back to my podcast. If it's the first time you're listening in, my name is Kenji and I'm a final year medical student and a biomedical science graduate studying at King's College London. And today I have a very, very special guest all the way from down under in Australia. I don't know if I said that right, but in Australia, who is Surina. So Surina, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure, yep, down under is correct. I'm Surina, I'm a junior doctor. I did my training and studying and everything in the UK. And did my F1 and F2 there. And now I'm in Australia, in Brisbane, doing my F3 year.
Okay, amazing. So if we can take things back all the way a couple of years ago. So what was your application to medical school? Like, how did you go all the way from like high school to where you are now?
That was definitely more than a couple of years ago. So we'll have to think back a bit. So I decided pretty late I wanted to go to medical school. Must have been 8-9 years ago now. I don't want to think about that too much. So it was towards right at the end of school, and I've always been kind of interested in everything, not able to focus in on one thing, basically have strong commitment issues. So I left it very late before I decided on medicine, and then went through the whole rush of doing all the volunteering and work experience and all those things you need to do, crammed it all into one. So decided towards the end of year 12, applied for medical school, got a place in UCL, University College London, and did a 6-year degree there. So that included a BSc in my third year, and graduated I think in 2019. So working for about 3 years now.
Amazing. So straight after UCL, I assume you went to work for the NHS. Actually, I know you went to work for the NHS because I've seen your videos. But what did you enjoy most about working as a junior doctor? What was that experience like?
It was probably quite a different experience to what everyone is expecting. Obviously, everyone is learning a lot, and you can never really know what it will be like. But a large part of my F1 and F2 was overshadowed by the pandemic. So I think it was fairly atypical in the kind of experience it was, perhaps compared to previous years.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, really the parts of it I was expecting. So the patient care, the learning, education, and all the kind of doctory things that I was expecting and had seen in work experience and at medical school, I really enjoyed. And that wasn't a surprise.
Yeah.
So, that was really good. Also, just the general team dynamic in the hospital was mostly really, really fun to be a part of, especially if you've got good colleagues and seniors who are willing to teach as well. So all of those things were enjoyable, but of course it was a bit overshadowed later on.
Yeah. So with regards to pandemic, so how did things go, being a new doctor, just qualifying with everything going on around the world?
Pretty scary. Thinking back on it now, I kind of can't believe it happened. I'm sure loads of people feel like that. Like, I can't believe we all went through that. Everything just changed so quickly, starting from small things like teaching getting cancelled to then not rotating our jobs to specialities we were expecting to do, to then the whole rota being overhauled. It was pretty chaotic, and definitely being made up as we went along. And even with treating people and knowing what to do with COVID patients, we were all just learning it on the job, which is, I guess, fairly normal for a doctor job, but still.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine what that must be like, because starting F1 as it is normally is like scary as it is and really, really hectic as it is. So having the pandemic on top of all of that must have been like so just crazy. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
God. Okay. So moving on to something a little bit more juicy. So on your channel, you alluded to a few things, regarding working as a doctor. I don't know if it was generally or kind of to do with NHS, but is there anything you didn't particularly like about working as a junior doctor, kind of getting towards the end of your foundation training?
Yes, there are a few things. I think, especially when you're in a group of doctors, you all kind of not encourage, but all feed off each other's complaining. And sometimes it can become quite whiny. And I try not to be like that, because all the good things about the job are amazing, and it's a big privilege of a job to have. And I'm always grateful to be in the position I am. And to be honest, the things I dislike about the job are very rarely about the day-to-day work itself. Like I said, the patient-facing aspect, the teamwork aspect, I absolutely love, very stimulating as well intellectually. So try not to complain about that side of things, but things that do make the day-to-day job a bit draining and can lead to things like burnout and people leaving, which is happening all the time and always increasing, the kind of environment that you're working in. So as you know, as I'm sure most people know, the hospital is open 24/7. We're working in hours, out of hours all the time. But sometimes out of hours, things can get really, really stressful. Things like understaffing and rota gaps, possibly not being as well supported sometimes, can be really stressful. It's already a really taxing job physically, as well as mentally. You're running around the whole hospital. My step count is amazing anytime I'm on call. And mentally as well, you've got so much coming at you. You have to prioritize and decide what's important, what can be left for later. So all of that is what I signed up for, but then not having a good support system can make that really stressful. Other things out of hours, doctors and all healthcare staff for that matter need to sleep, need to eat, yet there are no rest facilities or eating facilities out of hours, even though the hospital's open 24/7. And I think this probably comes from stress of the whole system rather than individuals not being nice, because like I said, generally everyone you work with are really cool and usually on the same page as you. But there's a lot of stress, a lot of pressures. So you do get people kind of talking down to you, asking why your things haven't been done while you're doing 10 other things. That can really wear away at you. And so those things I wasn't really expecting, and day to day, they didn't affect me that much. But when it all builds up, you're just really tired by the end. And I've talked about this on my channel before, and none of these things, like I said, are about the job or even about the money. Or that's a different story entirely. But I think they affect the quality of your job a lot and your satisfaction with your job as well.
Absolutely. That sounds like something that can be quite difficult for anyone, especially because being a doctor is already such a difficult job as it is. And you mentioned something I want to kind of pick up on. So you said that it's kind of like what we sign up for. Do you think that med school, because obviously I'm in my final year, I'm just about to start F1. Were you kind of surprised as to how things ended up being as an F1, F2 doctor? Or do you think it's kind of something that you already kind of expected going into starting F1 coming from medical school?
I think the most surprising thing from when you go to medical school and then actually become a doctor, and I think a lot of people agree with me, is the sheer volume of bureaucracy and paperwork. You train and study all these years and learn such cool things about the body and treating people and seeing these situations play out in front of you and how to deal with them. But the majority of the time when you're actually a doctor, especially a junior doctor, is so much admin. And that's probably the one part of the actual job that I will happily complain about. There is never-ending paperwork, very clunky systems of how to do them. So that was a big surprise, something I don't think I fully appreciated in medical school, even during placements, because you don't really pay attention to that side of things. You're more interested in learning, and you have the privilege of just being able to learn rather than having to do that side of the job. So that was probably one thing.
Okay. And yeah, I agree with that. I think so. Recently, I've been really surprised. I've just started my transition to F1 module, which at King's is like the final kind of transition to starting F1. So my final rotation. And like you said before, in my last rotations, I was really like focused on, learning medicine, learning, about all the patients, all the diseases. But now my placement is really about just shadowing an F1 and trying to learn what they do day to day. And yesterday is my first day. And it was really like, don't get me wrong, it was really like enjoyable and I really enjoyed it. But we spent probably an hour to 2 hours just either sat on the phone trying to like bleep, microbiology, and you have to go through switchboard and you're like 50th in the line and you have to like wait for 45 minutes just to speak to the microbiology consultant, which was actually quite surprising because I've never like had to, ask for advice from anyone in the hospital before. Or, you're ordering bloods and, you select like, let's say 5 different groups of, blood results that you'd want. And then there's like literally 25 clicks from when you order the bloods to actually getting ordered. And I'm just like, it doesn't make sense how you spend so much time clicking through systems or just like standing in line. It was really, really surprising actually.
Yeah. Understanding the system is like another degree in itself, honestly. And even
Yeah.
when you think you've just about got grips in one hospital, then you'll move and have to learn everything again. And yeah, sometimes it's really ridiculous. Like I was on the phone to Switch trying to talk to hematology once
Mm.
and spoke to them about a patient. They had a disease called hemophilia, and I was told I was speaking to the wrong person. I actually need to speak to the hemophilia.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Like how long will it take to get this advice?
Yeah.
Even things you think you know how to do, you're going through all these weird turns and roundabouts to get there.
Yeah.
But
We get there in the end after a couple of
yeah.
hours. And you mentioned something else I want to touch on, which was burnout. So in med school, I probably have experienced burnout, like, once or twice, or maybe a few times actually across the 5 years. As a doctor, is that something that you faced at all, or do you think it was quite manageable?
Yes, I think a lot. I think all, if most, sorry, I can't speak. I think most, if not all, of my burnout was related to the pandemic. It was extremely mentally taxing to see
Hmm.
everything that we did. Obviously, a lot of people were really unwell, and a lot of people were dying, especially in those early pre-vaccine days. Plus,
Yeah.
the whole rota was overhauled to mean that we all had to work a lot more out of
Mm.
hours on calls. So much of the staff workforce was off sick, so we were all having to step up. And I
Hmm.
think working at that level and within that environment for such a long time absolutely burnt me out. I think it was around February, March of 2021 when we'd had that
Hmm.
horrible peak over Christmas and things really went worse than they were before.
Yeah.
That's when I experienced burnout. Strangely, I have also experienced burnout to a smaller scale in Australia, and I think that was
Hmm.
more in line with what you'd expect someone to burn out with when we take, extreme cases like the pandemic out of the picture. My first
Yeah.
job here was a surgical job. Contrary to what I thought life in Australia would be like and what doctors in Australia would be like, this job
Yeah.
was extremely intense. We were starting
Hmm.
earlier than we were rostered to start, and we were finishing later than we were rostered to finish, which is
Hmm.
not unheard of in the NHS, but I definitely worked really hard to maintain my boundaries
Hmm.
and make sure that I kept that kind of stuff to a minimum. Whereas in
Yeah.
this job, I was obviously new, I didn't know anyone or how the system worked. Plus, everyone
Hmm.
around me was just kind of getting on with it, so I felt I had to. And
Yeah.
my normal, you know, 10-hour day was turning into 12, 13 hours, day in, day
Mm.
out, back to back.
Wow.
And by the end of that really short period, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks, I actually fully burnt out on that last day of my rotation, and I had to take
Hmm.
the day off, and I literally
Hmm.
was exhausted. So that was kind of more burnout in a way you'd expect in a job
Hmm.
not to do with the pandemic. So yes,
Yeah.
to answer that question in a very long way, yes, I have experienced burnout, and
Okay.
I think it is, from speaking to colleagues and friends, pretty common.
Okay. And is there ever a choice? So let's say they're giving you more hours than you can kind of take on. So let's say particularly during the pandemic or just generally as a doctor actually, if
Mm.
you kind of said you're rostered for 10 hours and then you have to come in for 13 hours, is there ever a choice? Maybe answer it in two ways. So like during the pandemic, obviously we have like a moral obligation to help our patients, but could you ever be like, this is more hours than I can take on. I'm feeling really burnt out and I don't want to come in. And then also kind of talking about in Australia just now, as you mentioned, can you just, is there a choice to say to them, I'm only rostered for 10 hours and I can't do anything outside of that?
I'll answer the UK side of things first. You are to some extent protected by your contract. You can only work 48 hours a week. It's difficult to argue against changes in rotas, etc., especially under such extreme circumstances, because the rota still met all the criteria that your contract states. So you can only work this many hours in a week. If you're doing nights, you must have a minimum of however many hours before your next shift. You can only work this many shifts in a row or whatever. The problem is, yes, those rules exist, but I think most people agree that the rotas definitely follow those rules to an absolute T, to the absolute extreme. So they make sure that even to the nearest minute that you have got exactly that amount of time between your night shift and your next day shift. Um, and so you can't really argue from it from a rota point of view. When they gave us our COVID rota, it was literally, I think, with less than 12 hours notice. So it came at around 9 or 10 p.m. And some of us were then due into work at 8 a.m. the next day, having previously been off. And that is against the contract kind of guidelines. And yes, we did raise those issues, but it was such a, I hate the word, but unprecedented situation that it was really hard to, you kind of had to get on with it. It was a bit of a crisis. So many staff were off sick, you had to get on with it. With Australia, where it was more a kind of, normal day-to-day job, that things weren't really going the way that I wanted and not in a way I could handle. Again, it was difficult because I was so new and I didn't really have a relationship with the rota coordinator or my seniors, or I didn't really feel comfortable speaking up. But yes, I did try point of it day to day, saying, actually, we start at this time. Actually, I need lunch because I need to eat. But it was really difficult. Going back to the UK when it was pre-pandemic, there was a surgical job I was in where they expected us to come in earlier than we were rostered, and we had to, prep the ward notes and everything for ward round. And because all four of us juniors felt the same way and we were willing to kind of support each other, we did stand up to it. And we did say, look, we start at this time, we're going to come at this time. You'll have to wait a few extra minutes to start ward round. And that's that. And actually our seniors did listen and did take on board. So yes, I think it is possible to stand up for yourself, but strength in numbers is one thing. And yeah, ideally you're not going through this, chaotic pandemic situation as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's so good to hear. Actually, going into my my F1 year, knowing that if something is against a contract or just is bothering me, then I can definitely speak up about it. And I absolutely will trying to form an alliance a lot, with F1s, try and make friends as much as I can.
Yeah, you'll be going through such a thing together. That's my favorite part about being a doctor, is you all will really
Yeah,
bond and will have each
that's so
other's
good.
backs. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that actually. Okay, so after completing F1 and F2 in the UK, so at what point did you decide to go to Australia, and why did you end up deciding to go?
So somebody asked me this recently, and I realized that I actually wanted to go to Australia as for in my F3 even before I got into medical school, which I guess is very early considering that I hadn't even done any training or the job at all and already had decided I wanted a break. But I think I'm not sure how or why. I think I might have been aware of this pathway because it is a really well-trodden path. Lots of UK doctors do this. So I think I might have been aware of some older friends, family friends doing this and really wanting to do it as well. I think it's such a unique job in that it can easily be transferred from one country to another. Obviously, it depends which country. There are various hoops for various countries, but at the core of it, your medical knowledge and your medical degree allow you to put that into work in another healthcare system fairly easily. So I'd always wanted to go abroad to work for that reason, and Australia specifically because I knew of people doing it. And yeah, it was at the back of my mind all throughout medical school, and definitely once I started working as well.
Okay, and but why not just stay in the UK for your F3 year? Was it like the sun that you really wanted, like a different experience? Why not just stay in the UK and work here?
Yeah, the sun was a big part. I always say, joke that I'm a leaf or I have some sort of photosynthesis process because I get so much energy from the sun. I don't know how I really survived in the UK for 26, 27 years. The reason I picked Australia was a few reasons. Firstly, people had done it before and it looked like a good time. So obviously I was intrigued. Secondly, there is basically no extra qualification or exam that you need to do to go to Australia. If you've got a, UK degree and you're GMC registered, you can pretty much just go straight there, which is really handy, very different to places like America, for example. Thirdly, the healthcare system is fairly similar. There is a bit more privatization here, but it works pretty similarly to the UK, similar resources, even the fact that everyone speaks English. And as I'm sure you've realized, medicine is another language entirely. So being in an English speaking country is very, very useful. And fourthly, which I've said last, but actually is probably the most important for me, is that Australia is a place that I've wanted to explore and travel for a really long time. And of course, living here and working here allows you that freedom and income and funds to let you do that. So it was just such a great deal to be able to come here to work, to then fund all the travels I've wanted to do here anyway for so long.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like such a dream, and hopefully I'll be living that lifestyle in a couple of years. And by
Yeah.
the way, is it Brisbane? Is that how you say it? Brisbane?
Yep,
Is that
I'm
where
in
you are?
Brisbane in Queensland. Yeah.
Brisbane. Okay, amazing. And have you managed to have that time to go and like travel and see the rest of Australia as well as working as a doctor?
Absolutely. The full time working week here is actually less than the NHS, which is handy. So you're paid more. So it's a pretty good deal. So there is enough time off, especially I find in jobs like ED here. That's a really good system where you work kind of 10-hour shifts a week, and then you have 3 days in a row off or 4 days in a row off, and then you're back. And you kind of keep switching between that, which is amazing for, you know, weekend trips or short trips away. One downside here is that in my specific hospital, it's not an Australia thing by any means. All my annual leave is in one block, in one 5 week block, which is actually coming up next week. And that's really annoying because, unlike in the NHS and previous jobs I've done, you can't kind of take a couple of days here, a couple of days there, and get time off throughout your year. You actually have to work, 47 weeks, and then you get your 5 weeks off in one go, which is really annoying and not particularly amenable to traveling as much as I hoped it would be. Having said that, I've lost count of the number of holidays I've had here and how much I've seen already, just with long weekends and swaps. So I can't complain.
Amazing. And you've kind of touched on this at this point already, but how does working as a doctor compare to the UK, compared to where you are now? Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, look, I think we all have this grass is greener mentality in the UK, especially when we hear about, our friends coming here and having such a great time. Objectively, it is a better working life, a better quality of working life. Like I said, less hours for your full-time job, so 38 hours versus 48 in the NHS a week. You're paid better. You are reimbursed for any extra time you do. So any overtime, public holidays, bank holidays, are really, really well, heavily reimbursed, which does make a difference. But yeah, like I also say to other people, it is at the end of the day, same nonsense, different country when it comes to healthcare systems, navigating them, the admin. There are still multiple forms, 6-step processes to do referrals. There are still staff shortages. I'd say at a baseline, it is a lot better, but especially with various COVID peaks happening here, we've had times of really short staffing, which causes the same, amount of stress it used to. So there is all of that still going on, but objectively, I'd say the quality of the work is better. Baseline staffing is better. Educationally, it's a really good place to work and train. So yeah, there are pros and cons.
Okay. And kind of outside your life as a doctor, so outside the hospital, how's your life been, compared to the UK in terms of quality of life and everything outside of medicine?
Infinitely better. I can't I can't say it any other way. It's been absolutely amazing living here in terms of quality of life. I think the weather plays a huge part in that, much more than I ever appreciated before I came here. The part of Australia I'm in is warm and sunny pretty much all year round. It's actually known as the Sunshine State. And with that, I think comes so many things. Firstly, it just looks nicer and you feel better. But also, there's so much more of a culture of being outdoors here. The weather combined with the mountains and the Great Barrier Reef and all the amazing kind of hiking and things you can do out here means people spend a lot of time outdoors, and you end up spending a lot of time outdoors here, which is amazing and something I really want to, that kind of mentality I really want to take wherever I go, whether I stay here or come back home. And yeah, there is a lot of stuff to see in Australia. It's an absolutely massive country. So really enjoying just exploring it, getting outdoors, enjoying the sun. And yeah, normal day-to-day life is just so much more exciting.
That sounds so good because yeah, I don't know. I guess living in the UK, or maybe it's a thing about living in London, on my days off from medical school and weekends, I'll be really excited to wake up on a Saturday, open the curtain, and it's like, pouring down with the rain. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I may as well just stay inside then, as I've done the last 5 days, revising and stuff like that. So I think I really do believe, yeah, weather plays a huge part in this. So I was brought up in East Africa and Kenya. And
Oh,
whenever
no.
I go home to like see my family and see my friends and stuff like that, it's like you said, the sun really gives you that energy. And even if you are staying indoors, just sitting in the garden and having that fresh air and the sun can really change your outlook on life and how you see everything else. Hence why I'm also considering to go to Australia as well. And with that, yeah, with that said, what you just said, So how does one ever go back to the UK? After experiencing that lovely lifestyle and the weather, how is that even possible? And what are your
Oh,
plans for the future as well?
yeah, that is the tough question. I guess it is ultimately the pull of your family and friends. I think that is the biggest reason. There's tons of us out here in Brisbane. I think about 80 of us who came out in, the same time I did, and the vast majority are heading back, and I'm pretty sure it'll be the same for me as well because it is just so far away. You can't just pop home. You start missing out on things, birthdays and weddings and all that kind of stuff. But that is a loss as good as life is here. So I think for that reason, I probably will head back as good as life has been. But yeah, I do worry that nothing will live up to this time in my life ever again. And people do go back to England and then come back to Australia. So that's always a possibility. I think the second reason for me personally will be training opportunities in terms of medicine. So surgery is super competitive here, as it is in England, but here there's still the culture of who you know, having to prove yourself to your seniors, because a big part of the application process is who are the people who are backing you, and putting in a good word for you, which isn't really that much of a thing in England. And therefore I think the application process is a lot more doable, and you can get through the portfolio, get the points and get on the training program. Whereas here it's really hard to infiltrate that system, especially as an international graduate. So yeah, I can kind of see training being a little bit easier to get onto and get through it in the UK.
Okay. So were you interested in, was it breast surgery or thoracics or something like that?
Yeah, breast surgery, yeah.
Breast surgery. Okay. So do you think, are you still interested in breast surgery, and are you thinking of, getting onto a training program in sometime in the future?
Yes, I am for now. I do change my mind a lot, but I have been interested in surgery for a while. I did a taster week in breast surgery not too long before I came to Australia and absolutely loved it. I've always wanted to do some sort of surgical specialty, or at least always wanted to for the last few years, but was a bit mindful about the lifestyle that I might be then signing up to. But the breast surgeons I saw, and from what I understand of it as a specialty, they have a great lifestyle, very minimal out of hours work, which is really something I want in my career. I've got a breast surgery job here as well after my annual leave. So when I come back, which I'm really looking forward to. And yeah, for now, that is the kind of end game, end goal.
Okay. Nice, and I really look forward to watching all your videos on your channel. Transitioning back to the UK, I think that'll also be really good to just to see how you cope
Yeah.
with the transition and everything else like that. So the final question that I ask all doctors on my channel, or actually anyone who comes onto my channel, having gone through F1, F2 in the UK, putting all the effort in the application to get into Australia, the pandemic and things like that. I know it was really difficult for you to actually start working in Australia because of all how strict they were in terms of COVID. After all of that, was the juice worth the squeeze? So was it all worth it to get to where you are now in Australia?
Yes, it was. I think there's very few opportunities in life that give you so much flexibility and scope to travel, as well as learn so much and stimulate yourself intellectually. So it's all been worth it. I think it opens so many doors. You meet a lot of like-minded people. So yeah, pretty happy with all the decisions made, despite the not so good parts at times as well.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Okay, and if people like what you've said, if they resonate with your story, if they want to learn more about how to get into Australia, where can they find you? Where's the best place?
So most active on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Surina Teenager. I've got an Instagram page, which Instagram page, which I every now and then will post on, which is at Dr. Surina Teenager. Yeah, those are the two best places.
Amazing. And whoever's listening, I highly recommend you go check out her videos. They've really inspired me to pursue medicine, possibly in Australia one day. And just generally, just generally as a doctor and as a medic, just watching your videos are really inspiring. So thank you so much, Surina, for coming onto the channel. Thank you guys so much for listening as well. And I'll catch you all on the next one.
Thank you.